talk about calculating slope, the first thing we need to do is understand what the definition of slope is. A lot of you guys learned this in Algebra 1, so this is some review stuff. So slope is the direction and steepness of a line. So what the direction, whether it's positive or negative, and the steepness, how steep it is as a line. So there's a couple of things that we have to remember when we're talking about slope and what lines look like and how we can tell positive and negative slope. So if a line looks like this is a very important concept right here. So if a slope is going up from left to right, it's a positive slope. That's important to remember. Again, if it's going up from left to right, like that one is, then we know it's positive. If it's going down from left to right, this would be an example of negative slope. If you have a horizontal line like that, this would be no slope. And the last case is if it's vertical like this, that would be a case where you would have to divide by 0 and you would get undefined slope. So those are important things to remember when we're talking about slope and direction and all that kind of stuff. Now we'll talk about calculating slope. So there's really two different ways we're going to go about it. One is by calculating slope on a graph. So if I draw myself a graph right here and then I give myself 2 points, the first time I do this, the first point I'm going to use is 2, 2. So I'm going to put a point at 2, 2. The next point I'm going to use is 4, -3. So 4, -3. And I'm going to go ahead and draw myself a line here. So if I get a graph that looks like this, and I want to determine what the slope is on this line, then M, or slope, M is the letter that you use for slope when you in math. M is equal to rise over run on a graph. So rise is up or down, obviously, and run is left or right. So when we're talking about this specific example, if I wanted to do rise over run, I start at the point at the bottom and I calculate the rise. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because I'm counting to the other point. So that would be 5 over the run, which would be 1, 2. And I'm moving left 2, so negative. Anytime we're using slope and we talk about moving left, it's negative. Anytime we're talking about on a coordinate plane and we move left, it's negative. So your slope would be 5 over -2 or -2.5. So that would be an example. Moving on, talking about the next example. Again, if we're talking about slope on a graph, then we're talking about rise over run. So we'll do another example here just to make sure we understand the concept. So we got, if I had a point, I'm going to put this point at 3, 4 first. And then the next thing I'm going to do is put a point at -1, 2. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw my line through these 2 points. Once I do that, I got 3, 4 and -1, 2. We know that M, or slope, is equal to rise over run. So I start at the bottom point and I count the rise, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I count the run. Now we're counting right, so we know it's positive, and that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So 6 over 4, when you reduce that, you end up with 3 over 2, and that would be my slope. My slope would be 3/2, 3 over 2. Next, when we're talking about slope between 2 points, this is a little different. This one we use a formula for. This is when we don't have the graph and they don't give it to us. So when we're talking about the slope, or M, between 2 points, we're talking about the formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So for example, if I asked you to calculate the slope between the 2 points, 14, 11, and -2, 5, this is what that would look like. We've already talked about numerous times about x1, x2, y1, y2. So the first thing we need to do is label. So this would be x1, y1. This would be x2 and y2. So again, we know the formula for slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So moving on, I go ahead and plug stuff in. We can see that y2 is 5. So that would be 5 minus y1, which is 11, over x2, which is negative 2, minus x1, which is 14. 5 minus 11 would give us negative 6, over negative 2 minus 14 would give us negative 16. And then once I go ahead and reduce this fraction, I would end up with, we know when you have a negative divided by a negative, that would equal positive. And then when I reduce 6 over 16, I get 3 over 8. So that would be my slope between those 2 points. Another example, let's do, if I had the point negative 2, 7, and negative 11, negative 4. If I had these 2 points, first thing I need to do is label x1, y1, x2, y2. Now, when I talk about these, again, my formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. When we go to plug these in, y2 is negative 4 minus y1, which is 7, over x2, which is negative 11, minus x1, which is negative 2. So in this case, we'd have a minus negative. So negative 4 minus 7 would be negative 11, over negative 11 minus negative 2. These would be plus. So negative 11 plus 2 would give me negative 9. Once I reduce that, it doesn't reduce because both of those numbers you can't divide by each other. So I would just end up with positive 11 over 9 because both of those are negative turned to positive. So that's how we calculate slope when we're talking about on a graph and when they just give you 2 points. Make sure you record all the important concepts and make sure you have your definitions written down, and I'll see you in class.